This is actually a teaching session here, Dario.
Let's go.
The website is based on the concept of heuristic teaching. People talk about the matrix, and they talk about being trapped by the matrix, and that the matrix has become synonymous with a trap or a snare, but they don't really know how the system works. So, based on my 10 years experience and the hundreds of thousands of dollars it took to train me and get trained in the right of self-determination so that we could create a solution, heuristics became important because we did a lot of trial and error, a lot of testing, and a lot of common sense, a lot of reading, law dictionaries, case law, and also looking at the system and what it had to say about certain things, like the Matrix movie. The Matrix movie was all about the right of self-determination. So when you're using heuristic principles, it's to learn what you don't know so that you can come to solutions. And that's what it says about heuristic methods, is to rapidly come to solutions. The question is, what education is going to set you free and empower you in your life? They're going to get an education in the next 2 years that would take them $250,000 going to Harvard University to learn. And even then, they would not learn some of what I'm getting ready to share with you. Okay?
Gotcha.
So what I'm going to do in this session is I'm going to play 8 minutes and 45 seconds of a presentation that Tim and I just recorded. Tim is an expert forensic accountant. He's recognized as an expert by the House of Commons and Parliament in Canada. He and I are discussing the banking, and this is just part 1, Partners in Crime, the doctrine of particeps criminis. All right, what I wanted to discuss was this document you sent me called It's All Criminal by Design.
Right.
Particeps criminis. This is the concept, going back to the Latin, that we first started out with, and we see here it means that accomplice in a crime.
Right. Essentially what we're dealing with is what the mafia refers to as the made man principle.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
No.
That before they will take you into their confidence as one of the gang, they need to see you kill somebody in front of them. That's when you become a made man. Now, the same basic principle is the banks will not do business with you unless and until you are willing to commit a crime in front of them so that they know that they will never be able to be sued by you for the equitable fraud that they are committing against you.
Did you bring these matters into the Canadian court?
It took 2 or 3 years to get through the courts, but it went from the trial division in Ontario to the Ontario Court of Appeal, and then to the Supreme Court of Canada, and they all held that although what the corporate lender had done was plainly criminal and contrary to Section 347 of the Criminal Code, the criminal law only says you go to jail if you do this, that it's a felony. It does not expressly state that you shall not do it, and therefore the act itself that the bank had committed, though clearly criminal, is not fundamentally illegal, and they enforce the contract anyways. In other words, they're spitting in our faces and calling us idiots. We don't have an answer for you, so we're just going to make something up that's really silly, and not one of you out of 33 million are going to say anything. You're just going to sit there and take it. Regardless of how ridiculous it is, you will not question authority in this country. And they got away with it. So, see, it was a de facto coup against the Parliament. What they did was they ruled that criminal acts are not fundamentally illegal, and from this moment forward, the criminal law is merely a guideline that the courts will consider, but it is no longer binding upon them. It's really quite ingenious the way it's set up. It's just amazing.
Well, let's go through that, because based on the doctrine of particeps criminis, you're basically saying that the bank has set it up so that they will not do business with you until you first are participating in a crime.
Okay, virtually every mortgage contains one or more of 5 primary and criminal devices. They are the false receipt and or false declaration of ownership, fictitious consideration, bait and switch, wager, and concealment of loan fees by omission. Now, the most common that most people are familiar with is the false receipt and or false declaration of ownership. Now, this is when you go into the lawyer's office to so-called close on the deal, and you sign the mortgage, and it states to the effect, I, John Jane Smith, being registered as owner of an estate in fee simple of the following lands, and then they'll give a legal description of the property. Then it'll state to the effect, in consideration of the sum of however much principal amount, which is a defined sum, lent to me, past tense, by the bank, the receipt and sufficiency of which is hereby acknowledged, do hereby covenant as follows. And then the mortgage terms and conditions will follow. But as and when the mortgage is signed, witnessed, notarized, and delivered, generally both statements are objectively and demonstrably false. So the nominal borrower, you want the loan so that you can become the registered owner, and you've not yet received a penny from the bank. So what are you doing in the lawyer's office swearing under oath and penalty of perjury that you are the existing registered owner and that the bank has already paid you the loan proceeds? See? If you are put on the witness stand in a criminal trial for forgery or for making a false document with the intent that it be relied upon as genuine, you have no defense. They will put you on the witness stand. They will ask you, is that your signature, Mr. Smith? Yes or no? Yes, it is. And the statement that you were the existing registered owner and that you had already received the loan proceeds from the bank, were those statements true as and when you signed the document? And the answer you have to give is no, they were not true. Then the judge is, you're right there, you're guilty. You cannot say, but I didn't read the document. Well, you can, but it's no defense in law.
No, it's no defense at all. It's what I tell people about their signature. You have to know what you're signing. Let's just talk about this for a minute. The mortgage document, when you sign that, you are the mortgagor.
You're the mortgagor, and the bank is the mortgagee.
Right. You're the one who's giving them the mortgage.
Right.
So from a legal standpoint, it looks like you are the one that drafted the document.
Yes, exactly. That's why it says we mean the borrower, and you means the bank.
So now that you look like you drafted the document and you signed your name to it, you are the one that created the constructive fraud.
Yes, you're the one who's guilty of making a false document. I should qualify this that I'm going by Canadian jurisprudence, meaning that the decisions of the Canadian court.
Same thing is true here on Title 18, Section 1001, false statements and false claims.
Right. They call it constructive forgery to make a false document with the intent that it be relied upon as genuine. That is the act of forgery. There's many, many quotes I could give you from the law going back that the common law forgery does not merely consist in pretending to be someone else, but in signing your own name to a document that you know to make false attestations of fact is also forgery. It's not just pretending to be somebody else.
So based on the first two sentences in a mortgage document, you're good for about 30 years.
Right.
It's
yeah,
great.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you see, there are two things. There are only two things. There's law and there's equity. Law, you've got to understand, is like complete the following statement. Law is a necessary what?
Evil.
Evil. You can't say that about equity. Equity is not a necessary evil because, first and foremost, it is not an evil. See, if you ask most people what is the opposite of law, they will say lawlessness.
Right.
And, like it's an automatic gamesay of the opposite of what they think it is. But no, the conceptual opposite of law is equity. Equity is to do what's right, virtuous, correct in and of itself. Law means to take what somebody else produced, which is why law has to be administered very, very religiously almost, the taking by force of stuff you didn't produce. Everybody's looking for the scam after you get into the game. You've already lost the moment you cross the threshold into that system. So what they're doing is...
No, I got to stop you right there. That is an excellent way to put it. I mean, I could use a religious term that relates to this. It's called touching the unclean thing.
Okay.
Because
right.
touching the unclean thing, the question is, well, can you make the unclean thing clean, or does the unclean thing make you unclean? According to the principle, the unclean thing makes you unclean.
Right.
You can't touch the unclean thing and make it clean. And that's the same principle here. If you sign this document, you're unclean. You've operated with unclean hands.
That's exactly right. It's called locus standi in curia, means literally standing before the court. And that is the first rule of equity jurisdiction, is that in order to ask for equity from the courts, you must be prepared to do equity, and your hands must be clean, which gives rise to the principle of participus criminis, meaning that partners in crime cannot sue each other through the courts, because the courts, by structure, cannot have anything to do with an illegal agreement.
Right. Well, let's breeze down to number 2 and go through these real quick.